turn to the book of Exodus chapter 2, beginning at verse number 1. Exodus chapter 2, beginning at the first verse. My brothers and sisters, for the few moments that we have together, we want to talk about, there's something special about a mother's love. There is something special about a mother's love. My brothers and sisters, as we approach this Mother's Day sermon, I don't claim to be able to speak for every mother in the building today or every mother who's watching us by YouTube, nor do I claim to speak for everybody's experience with their mothers. What I do want to do is I want to lift up this story here with Moses and Moses' mother, and talk a little bit about what Moses' mother does. I think there are some overlaps that are important to the time we're living in today, and make a couple of connections there. And then I think if we walk through this, we'll see that what Moses' mother does reminds us in some way about what God does for us. Is that all right today? As we look at this text, my brothers and sisters, we see that Moses' mother gets married and has a son at an interesting time. It's actually a dangerous time, a very dangerous time in the life of the Israelites in Egypt to have children. If we were to read chapter 1 of the book of Exodus, we would see that Pharaoh has looked out and seen that the Israelites in Egypt are beginning to outnumber the Egyptians. And Pharaoh is becoming afraid, saying, eventually we are going to lose our power if we continue to let this go unchecked. So let's stop this. We're going to bring a stop to this. And the way we'll bring a stop to this is we're going to stop all kids who are born, all the male children, we will kill them before they get born. Before they're fully born, we will kill the male children in the delivery process. But the Bible says that the Egyptian midwives, they know that Pharaoh's ruling is evil. There's something wrong with it. And even though Pharaoh has decreed it and made it the law, they refuse to obey Pharaoh's law and still let the children be born. And then when Pharaoh says, why are the children still being born? The midwives, they make up a story, they make up a lie, and they said, the Hebrew women are so strong that as soon as we hear that they're having children, we go, we're on our way, but by the time we get there, the babies are already born. And there's nothing that we can do. So Pharaoh decides to make another decree, and that is that every male child should be thrown into the Nile River in order to kill off, to begin to weaken the Israelites. So it is in this time, this very dangerous time, that Moses was born, my brothers and sisters. And the Bible says that when Moses was born, his mother sees something special in him. Mother sees that there's something special about her baby. I can only imagine, my brothers and sisters, Moses' mother felt the way any mother feels when they see their child for the first time. You feel like there's something special about this life that God has given you. There's something special. There's baby that's full of potential and love, and you're praying that it has a chance to live a full life. There's something special about this baby, and Moses' mother finds herself unable to concede to Pharaoh's demands. And so the first thing we want to say that Moses' mother does, my brothers and sisters, Moses' mother protects Moses. When the law dictates that Moses should be killed, Pharaoh's mother hides Moses from public view so that nobody knows that Moses is born. She hides Moses as long as she can. She keeps him safe. And then when it's no longer possible for her to hide him, she knows that she has to do what the law says, but she has an interesting way of getting around the law. She follows the letter of the law. The law says that they have to throw them in the river, and so she does what child in the river, but she puts her child in a boat in the river, still protecting the child. Finding a way to circumvent the law, my brothers and sisters. But not only does she put the child in the river, but she puts her daughter, the child's sister, to watch the child as he's in the river, to make sure that nothing happens to him. And then when Pharaoh's daughter finds Moses, she protects him again until he's old enough to be given back to Pharaoh's daughter. Over and over again in the text, we see that Moses' mother protects him, my brothers and sisters. And I don't know what your experience is, but I've had an experience with a protective mother. I remember what it was like when I was out on the playground, and I was trying to hold my own on the playground with the kids out there, and my mother felt like the kids were mistreating me, and so she wanted to step in and stop the kids, and I had to try to, Mom, I got this. I gotta handle this. You don't know that if you try to protect me now, once you leave, it's gonna be worse. So let me do this. But there was something about my mother's instinct of wanting to protect me. Do you know any protective mothers, my brothers and sisters? I had a protective mother. When the first snowflake looked like it was about to fall out of the sky, I had on the heavy coat, the gloves, the scarf, the earmuffs. I looked like the abominable snowman walking around, and nobody else had on all the stuff. And they said, Nelson, why do you have on all that stuff? And I said, you got to ask my mother. It's my mother. She was trying to protect me, my brothers and sisters. But it's not just about the little things. It's not just about the bullies on the playground. It's not just about the weather that we try to protect our children, my brothers and sisters, but oftentimes we try to protect them from making mistakes that we know are going to be dangerous or possibly even life-threatening. Things that seem like little things now, but we know how the road ends. And we know that if this decision isn't made correctly now, if we don't learn the disciplines now, it just seems, homework seems like a little thing, but if you don't learn how to do the homework now, it's going to translate into trouble when you're trying to figure out how to do your job well later. If you don't get the grades now, it's going to cause trouble when you're trying to get employed later. Mothers know these things, and they try to protect children from dangerous decisions, my brothers and sisters. And this is even more complicated by the fact that we live as black people in a world that is often hostile and very unfriendly to African Americans, that we know that decisions that our children make can impact them much worse than the decisions that other children make. My brothers and sisters, it's not been so long that we've forgotten Trayvon Martin. A young man who was doing nothing wrong, as it turns out, who was walking in his neighborhood, having gone to the store and purchased a bag of Skittles, having gone to the store and purchased a can of Arizona iced tea. He was simply walking home from the store in his neighborhood to his house and lost his life because somebody assumed that he was up to no good. And it didn't take the Trayvon Martin case for us to know that these things happen, our brothers and sisters. I remember I was in high school, and my parents had a curfew. My parents had a curfew at midnight. I had to be home at midnight. I thought it was unfair for me to have to be home at midnight. None of my friends had to be home at midnight. And by this time, I was already 6'2", 6'3", and I thought I could handle myself. I thought I would be all right. And so I figured, why does it make sense for me to have to be home at midnight when nobody else was? So one day I decided that my wisdom was better than my parents' wisdom on this matter. And so I was going to ignore my midnight curfew. Now, I'm going to date myself and tell you a little bit about, this was before there were cell phones. This was when my parents gave me a pager. I had a pager just for times like this, when my parents needed to get a hold of me. and the pager starts beeping around 12:05 because my parents are figuring out where am I and why I am not home. But I have not even left the party yet at 12:05. I was still there at the party, and we weren't doing anything but sitting around talking. And my pager starts vibrating, and I know it's not going to stop. And so rather than picking up the phone and calling, I just do what any 17-year-old do who is trying to break curfew. I just flip it off. And figure somehow if I ignore it, it will go away. Now, let's be honest, you don't have to be 17 to fall victim to that. There's some of us who are way past 17 where every once in a while we try to ignore stuff hoping it goes away. I flipped it off and I ignored it, just thinking it would go away. And so finally, about 1:15, 1:20, I decided I should finally head home. So I'm driving home down Beachmount Avenue, feeling on one hand really good about myself that I made this decision. And on the other hand, dreading what's going to happen as soon as I get home. But it didn't even take me long enough to get home, my brothers and sisters, to realize the folly of my actions. Because as I'm driving along, very much doing the speed limit because I am in no hurry to get home at this point. Blue and red lights start flashing by. And I get pulled over by a police officer. So I say, Mr. Officer, can I help you? The police officer says, what are you doing driving in this neighborhood? Well, Mr. Officer, I live in this neighborhood. I'm actually driving home. He says, well, can I see your license? And so I showed him my license. Now, I was in a play earlier that day. It was the cast party for the play. And so, because I was in the play, half of my hair was black and half of my hair was silver because I had not washed all the color out of my hair from the play. So here I am looking at the police officer with half black and half silver hair. And the police officer must think that there's either something wrong with me or I'm in. So the police officer asked me to get out of the car. Confused as to why, but I'm not going to argue with the police, so I get out of the car and I get searched and handcuffed. Never read or write handcuffed, and I'm sitting on the side of the road as the police officer begins to toss all the contents out of the car. And I can't do anything except for sit there and wait. I can't reach out to anybody, I can't explain what's happening. Nobody knows where I am, and I have no idea how this night is going to end. So after finding nothing in the car, this officer says, put the stuff back in the car and go home. And so uncuffs me and leads me to take all the stuff that he'd thrown out all over Beachmount Avenue in the car and drive home. And I get home, and I knew my parents weren't happy, but they knew something happened to me. And so they said, you know what? We'll just talk about this in the morning. So I get up the next morning and somebody said, what happened? So I explained to them what happened on my way home. And my dad just got up and he walked out of the room. My mother said, I know you don't get this, but we've lived through this. And we knew that these things happen. And so you being home at 12 o'clock has nothing to do with you. It's not that we don't trust you. It's not that we don't think that you're able to handle yourself. It's that we know that the world is out to get you. And so we want you home so that you can be safe, so that the world doesn't get its hands on you. And it was an eye-opening experience, my brothers and sisters. But it's the world we live in. So part of what it means to be a mother in this world is trying to protect your children. But Moses' mother does more than just protect Moses. Moses' mother provides for Moses. For the first 3 months of Moses' life, she's nursing Moses as Moses is growing. After Pharaoh's daughter gives Moses back she nurses Moses again until he's able to go and live with Pharaoh's daughter. Over and over again, we see Moses' mother providing for Moses. And I just believe, my brothers and sisters, the Bible doesn't say this, but I believe that Moses' mother does more than just provide physical nourishment for Moses. I just believe that every night as Moses' mother was putting him to sleep, she was saying to him, Moses, I want you to remember, I know you can't really understand now, but I just want you to hear and remember that you are special. That you are somebody. That God has called you at a time for something great. I want you to remember that even though you're growing up in Pharaoh's house, you're not one of Pharaoh's children. That you are an Israelite and that we worship Yahweh. I want you to always remember who you are. My brothers and sisters, I just believe that the reason when we see Moses as an adult, the reason why Moses is so angry about the treatment of his people is that when he was young, his mother put in him the foundation to understand who he was. So that no matter where he grew up, he would not forget where he came from. I just believe that she provided more than just the physical needs, that she provided a foundation that would go with Moses throughout the rest of his life. And brothers and sisters, that we have to understand that just as God has a call on each of our lives, and each of our children, God has something special for them. Even now, God is calling our children. They aren't here accidentally, my brothers and sisters. But God is calling them for a purpose. To be able to walk in times that we ourselves will not be able to walk in. To be able to lead in times that we won't be able to wrap our minds around, my brothers and sisters. There's only so much we can do, and we will have to turn the world over to our children. And so we must provide for them not just their physical needs, but their emotional and spiritual needs, the foundation that they will need to live into the time in which God is calling them. It's why we take time as a part of our worship to spend time with our children and teaching our children, because they need that foundation. They need to know that there is a God in heaven who sits high and looks low and is watching out even over them. That there's a God who loves them, who cares for them, who is calling them to be the boys and girls, to grow up to men and women that God is calling, that the world needs at this time, my brothers and sisters. We've got to be able to provide a foundation. The last thing Moses' mother does, my brothers and sisters, and this is the most difficult one, Moses' mother not only protects and provides, but she realizes that at some point she has to place Moses in someone else's hands. She realizes that because of the way that Egyptian life is structured, Moses cannot grow up in her house and be safe. So ultimately, she must place Moses in someone else's hands. Can you imagine the difficulty? Moses is probably still a toddler, maybe 4 or 5 at the oldest, that she takes Moses to Pharaoh's daughter for what she knows will be the last time, and gives Moses over to Pharaoh's daughter. Can you imagine how it must have broken her heart as she let Moses go from her care into the care of Pharaoh's household, my brothers and sisters? But she knew that if Moses was going to be, to grow up to be the leader that God was calling for, she had to let him go. And hopefully it doesn't have to happen that soon. But life is about a series of letting go. Trusting the people whose hands we place our children. I was thinking about my mom. I remember when I went to school, and I remember the first day of every school year, my parents drove me to school. And I don't know why I forgot that they did this, because they did it every year. But they would go and instead of just dropping me off and letting me walk into school, they would actually walk into school with me. And finally, when I got so old that I just hated it, they let me walk in by myself, but they walked in behind me and let me go where I was going, but they went to talk to the principal and every teacher they could find. I want you to know, my son is coming to school. My son Nelson is going to be in your class. And he's not just anybody, so I don't want you to treat him just like anybody. When my parents took me to church and placed me in the children's church, placed me in the children's church choir, they went and they spoke to the director of the children's church choir, and they said, my son Nelson isn't just anybody. I'm placing him in your care, and if something happens while he's here, I'm holding you accountable. My parents knew they had to place me in somebody's hands, and so they were always talking to the people's hands and whom they placed me. My brothers and sisters, but the time came when they had to place me in hands that they didn't know. And this is the difficult thing for each parent, is knowing that there's a time when we can no longer make the decisions for our children. There comes a time when we can no longer govern or guide their life. There comes a time when we let them go into hands that we do not know. And simply pray that they make the right decision. It's a difficult time, my brothers and sisters. But I believe what made this maybe just a little easier for Moses' mother was she knew that ultimately she was not placing Moses in Pharaoh's daughter's hands. Yes, Moses was going to Pharaoh's daughter's house, but it wasn't in Pharaoh's daughter's hands that she was placing Moses' life. It was not even in Pharaoh's hands. Yes, Moses was going to be under Pharaoh's roof, in Pharaoh's custody, but she was not placing Moses in Pharaoh's hands. But there was a power that was greater than Pharaoh. She knew, my brothers and sisters, that even from the day he was born, Moses' life was in God's hands. And in God's hands was the best place he could be. Well, my brothers and sisters, I said that what Moses' mother does shows us a little bit about what God does, my brothers and sisters. And so I want to hurry to my seat, but before I go, I want to let you know, just in case you need a reminder, that the first thing God does for us is God protects us. My brothers and sisters, I remember when Jesus was in his ministry, and they bring to Jesus a woman who was caught in adultery, and they are prepared to execute her because the law says that because she's caught in adultery, she should die, Jesus. So what say you on this matter? And what Jesus does, my brothers and sisters, is not judge or condemn the woman, but he protects her. The Bible says that while they are arguing with Jesus, Jesus simply gets down on his knees and begins to write in the sand. Now, the Bible doesn't say what Jesus wrote in the sand. And I've heard some people say that Jesus perhaps was writing the sins of all the people who were gathered around so they might be reminded of their sins. But that doesn't sound like the Jesus I know. And so I just imagine, I don't know this, it's not in the Bible, this is just me imagining this. I imagine in my spiritual imagination that what Jesus is writing down was perhaps a prayer of protection for the woman. Maybe Jesus was remembering the 91st Psalm and he was writing down, you who dwell in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. I will say of the Lord, you are my refuge, my fortress, my God, in you do I trust. Surely you shall deliver me from the snare of the fowler and the noisome pestilence. 1,000 of my enemies will fall at my side and 10,000 at my right hand, but it won't come near me. Only with my eyes shall I behold and see the reward of the wicked, for he will give his angels charge over me to keep me in all my ways. They will bear me up in their hands, lest I dash my foot against the stone. I believe that Jesus might have been writing a prayer of protection for the woman. Maybe he was writing the 23rd Psalm, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. He restores my soul. He prepares A table before me in the presence of my enemies. He anoints my head with oil, my cup runs over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. I believe Jesus might have been writing a prayer of protection for the woman. Maybe he was writing the words of the song my grandmother used to sing as she put me to bed all night and all day. The angels are watching over you, my child, all night and all day. God's got his angels watching over you. After Jesus gets finished writing whatever it was that Jesus wrote, he gets up and he says, whoever hears who is without sin, let them cast the first stone. Jesus protected the woman, my brothers and sisters, and just like Jesus protected the woman, God still protects us. God protects us, my brothers and sisters. My grandfather would say that God protects us from danger seen and unseen. God protects us, my brothers and sisters. God is always watching over us, keeping us, my brothers and sisters. And if you need to know that God is protecting you right now, my brothers and sisters, just do me a favor. Won't you just inhale real quick and then exhale real quick. And if you can inhale and if you can exhale, that means you're still alive, which means God is protecting you. God protects us, my brothers and sisters, but not only does God protect, but God provides for us. My brothers and sisters, twice now we've seen Jesus when he's with the crowd is without food, and Jesus is able to provide enough food to feed a crowd, my brothers and sisters. 5,000 the first time and 4,000 the second time. Jesus is able to provide what they need. And not only does Jesus provide the food that they need, but Jesus is providing the teaching that the disciples need, my brothers and sisters. Being patient with them when they can't figure it out. Not casting them to the curb because they make a mistake, my brothers and sisters, but Jesus is always providing what they need. My brothers and sisters, I don't know what your testimony is today, but I know that my testimony is that there have been times when I did not know where my next was coming from. There have been times, my brothers and sisters, when I was in a corner and I didn't know how I was going to get out, and all I could do was call on the Lord and say, Father, I stretch my hands to thee, no other help I know. And God made a way, my brothers and sisters. Because God made a way for somebody today. The Lord protects us and the Lord provides for us. My brothers and sisters. And then God places us in the best hands that there are. My brothers and sisters, when Jesus was hanging on the cross, and Jesus is looking there at his mother, knowing that his mother would need somebody to look out for her. He was no longer able, he says, woman, look, take John as your son. He turns to John and says, John, take Mary as your mother. That Jesus, my brothers and sisters, provides community for his mother and for John so that they could be there and take care of each other. My brothers and sisters, what I'm simply trying to say is that God has placed you in good hands. And if you don't believe me, won't you just turn to the neighbor next to you and say, neighbor, let me see your hands for a minute. Look at your neighbor's hands, my brothers and sisters. Don't those look like good hands to you? God has placed you in good hands, my brothers and sisters, because God has placed you in this community. And in this community, there are people with good hands that will hold you up, my brothers and sisters. There are people who won't let you fall. God has placed you in good hands, my brothers and sisters. Just look around and look at all the good hands that God has placed you in, my brothers and sisters. But ultimately, we know that there's some problems in our life that no matter who's around us, that nobody can help. Every once in a while, we just get into a situation where it seems like nobody's able to provide the answer for it, my brothers and sisters. And God has the best good hands assurance that there is. Bible says that after Jesus looked and said, woman, behold thy son, son, behold thy mother, Jesus said one more thing before he gave up his life, and he said, Father, in your hands I commend my spirit. And the same hands that Jesus gave himself into, my brothers and sisters, the same hands that held Jesus even through the death on the cross, the same hands that held Jesus when he was in a tomb for 3 days, the same hands that raised Jesus from the dead are the same hands that are holding you now, my brothers and sisters. God has you. God is holding you. There is no height you can ascend to, no depth that you can sink to, no distance too far, no place too near that you get outside of the reach of God's hands. God is holding you, my brothers and sisters. No matter where you are, no matter where you go, God protects. God provides. And God places us in good hands. We have a practice, my brothers and sisters, we call response to the word.